She did great too.
All right, awesome. All right, well, welcome back, Aligning with Success, everybody. Happy to be here and happy to share. Again, thank you to everyone who joined in on the Master Day. It was, I thought it was a really great day of presentations of different contrasting messages, but with the theme. In fact, I had a theme hit me, one theme, many dreams. That's sort of the real Nikan story, right? It's one theme, many dreams. So uh, maybe we'll see that in the marketing material in the future. Anyways, what I will do tonight is, as I said on the call on Saturday, I would get into some of the meat behind this presentation because you always think about what did I say, what didn't I say, what did I think I was going to say that I forgot or whatever after the fact, because you wonder, I mean, when I put it together, I knew what I wanted to say, but when you're under a time crunch, you're a little bit more aware of the clock than you want to be in, so you sort of skip some things. And some of the information is so amazing because it all comes back to what I was really trying to convey is if you trust, if you had 100% conviction that your thoughts were being projected into a hologram, and what you were seeing in terms of your life was the manifestation of those thoughts, the composite of those thoughts, however you arrive at those thoughts that you've injected emotion into, that your life experiences are simply the manifestation of that. If you were 100% certain of that, if it was like oxygen, it just happens in the background, it sustains you, you don't think about it, but that's the way it works. If you had that kind of awareness, and the only thing that you can change is your thoughts, you have the ability to decide what thoughts to entertain, what thoughts to reject, then you would be much more careful about the thoughts you entertain and much more careful about who you allow into your mind, who you allow to influence your thoughts, and how you therefore feel about things. You become extremely conservative, I would imagine, as to the sphere of influence you allow yourself. And you would be much more prone to, I would imagine, entertain thoughts and emotions that are in alignment with the things that you want to experience in life. So you would become more attuned to, it's like music. You would tune to the channel that you want to listen to because you want to experience that feeling. You would tune to the TV program that brought on that, etc. So we would become much more aware of the music we're listening to, the TV programs we're watching, the news we're paying attention, the voices we're letting in, the books we're reading, and so forth. It would be something we did automatically, and we wouldn't easily give over that power, that authority to others to manipulate our thoughts and feelings. And so we would become gatekeepers. And I think if we really understood the laws the way I understand the laws, the way we understand many laws in the world, and we know they're physical laws, then we would make that distinction and we start to change our behavior accordingly. I think one of the reasons why we don't have that kind of a connection to the laws is because, number one, we're not taught them. It's not something in your educational system. I mean, I got a degree in aerospace engineering. Believe me, we went through a lot of laws, and none of them are the stuff that I learned from Bob Proctor and the likes of him and the books that I've read on his recommendation and so forth. So and all the books of successes, the success people don't talk about the laws of physics. They talk about the laws of consciousness. So what the heck? Why didn't I get that education if that was going to make such a difference in the way I live and my quality of life? So we don't get taught those laws. So it's not something we really, really understand. And the other thing is, we don't experience the effects instantly. And so we don't really necessarily correlate cause and effect. And since we don't correlate cause and effect, we don't know that there's a cause and an effect. We just experience the effect, and it's hard to us to figure out what was the cause. We usually think it was random. Oh, it happened to me. Or why do these things always happen to me? No, these things always happen through you because it's a law. And so when you start to, and the reason, by the way, that gap exists between when we think things and when we experience things, can you imagine if that gap did not exist? Just think for a moment. What would happen if everything you thought or got emotional about instantly manifested in your life? How crazy would life be? Somebody cuts you off in the street when you're driving, and it causes an emotional reaction. As good as you are controlling your thoughts and feelings, like the Vulcans on Vulcan and Star Trek, you still have some feelings, and you project that feeling, and next thing you know, you got this person hitting a pole or something. I mean, think about it. There's a reason why we don't experience the effect immediately. That was for our own protection. I think the universe is divinely organized, perfectly organized, and the laws that govern it make it so that we can learn in our own way, in our own time. You learn when you touch the stove, even though your parents said, don't touch the stove because it'll burn you. And of course, you don't believe them, or you have to figure it out for yourself, and you touch it, and it's like, or you get a shock when you stick your finger on an electric socket, or we've all had these things. And those reactions are instant. Like you feel those, like you don't do that again. You had that burn, you don't do that again. And so if life was like that for our thoughts, then we would probably learn very, very quickly. And at the same time, it's interesting too, but I think life would get boring. Think about that for a second. Do you think that maybe life would be boring if you pretty much knew everything all the time because you understood the laws implicitly, and then you manifested instantly? At some point in time, you'd kind of just get bored of everything. So I think the way the universe was designed, what God intended was for this to give us an experience. Life is an experience, and it's a sequence of experiences, each one fulfilling its own purpose and enriching us in its own unique way, with an experience, with an understanding, and a sense of self, a sense of understanding of who we are in the place we're in. Not all experiences are joyful. Some of them are pretty devastating and so forth. But I think when we slip over to the other side and we get to see our life in review, I think you're going to find that those times when you felt terror while you were on the roller coaster, or felt shock or terror, horror when you were in that movie theater, when you went to see a horror picture, why you would choose to do that, think about it. You went to do that on purpose to feel the shock and the horror. You expose yourself to that because you wanted to feel that without having to actually go through a terrorizing situation. So movies are really great because we get to live vicariously in all these different situations that we don't want to actually physically live through, but we want to sort of emotionally live through for a temporary moment in time and get the jolt of that experience. So think about it. Life is sort of a montage of the sequence of events that we experience, all these emotions, and we are going to appreciate even the down, because it's the valleys that give us a sense of the peaks. It's the gaps between these things, the highs and the lows, that really give us a sense of what is a high, what is a low. So having said that, let me pick up on the presentation. Before I do that, I still have my door open because I had the cat inside my office. Let me just close my door, and that way we can get some quiet. Give me 1 second. Alrighty. Okay, and by the way, since this is a bit of a workshop / training, feel free, if you have a question, use the thing to raise your hand. Otherwise, I won't necessarily see you because I only see so many people on my screen while I'm projecting the PowerPoint. So if you do have a question as we go along, jump in. Okay, so that's the equation. I plus M equals R. Intention plus mechanism equals results. We know this from humans being more, training. So if this is the accuracy, if this is a true equation, and I think it is a true equation, in humans being more, we learn something. The question they ask you is, what is the relative importance of intention plus mechanism equals results? In other words, the relative importance of intention versus mechanism to produce a result. Clearly, there's an intention. Clearly, there's a mechanism. You want to go to Chicago, you get on an airplane, you get on a train, you drive, you walk, you ride a horse, you ride a bicycle. Many mechanisms. But if your intention is not to go to Chicago, all the mechanisms in the world don't matter. So the relative importance is you got to have the intention. And then there's any number of mechanisms that'll do to produce the result. So essentially what we conclude is that it's all intention. Mechanisms appear, but what I've learned is when you have an understanding of the mechanism that appears, you spend less time thinking about the mechanism because you begin to trust the mechanism is there, it will appear, it will do its job, and then you become more and more appreciative of the intentions or the input that you're putting into the system. So as we know, these guys worked. Angelica, you have your hand up?
My question is, which do you have to know your intention first or the result?
Good question. So how do we know, you'll see this comes up. How did we know that there was an intention to go to the moon? How do we know that they actually intended to go to the moon?
They got there.
Because they got there. So if there wasn't an intention to go to the moon for the result, then would they have invented the math? Would they have invented the mechanism? Because you clearly see this is an invention. The math was something that they had to invent. They had to understand the nature of the universe in terms of physics in order to be able to accurately predict the behavior of their spacecraft in these circumstances so that they could increase the probability of a successful journey. So they developed the mechanism before they ever, after they intended to go to the moon. The mechanism followed the intention, not the other way around. So, and how do we know that they intended it? Because they got there. That's how we know, because we got a result. The result is they got there. If they stopped halfway and came back, what would you say was their intention? I would say it was to go into space and come back.
Not to go.
To go to the moon.
They didn't intend to really go.
Yeah. So the intention or the result reveals the real intention. So now you might say, well, how come, okay, one of the examples that was really used in my growing up in this was from one of our mentors, Larry Prophet. He used to talk about his sister, a stepsister, sister-in-law, I think it was a sister-in-law, who he would say was a hypochondriac. This is a woman who's always sick. Every family function, she was sick about this or sick about that or some sickness of some kind. Now you might think, okay, so the result is that she's sick, so she intends to be sick. Then you would say, well, what did she get out of being sick at that family function?
Sympathy.
Sympathy, attention. So no, sickness was the mechanism. Her intention was attention. The mechanism she would create was an illness of some kind. Interesting. So if we look at the result, we can actually understand what the true intention is. And then any number of mechanisms will do. So what's important about this idea of the mechanism is something that we will experience or discover or it'll unfold is simply because, did I answer your question? You have your hand up still.
Me?
Yeah.
I have another question.
Okay,
I
wait,
don't want
we got to get through this presentation. We
Okay,
won't get
okay,
through it
good,
if you're
good.
asking a question
No
in
worries,
5
you're
seconds.
right,
Okay,
you're
so let's stay with this. Write it down. Okay, so we know that the laws are there. We know these laws are very specific because people have studied them and they create predictable behavior. So these laws are actually really good, accurate descriptions of the mechanism that makes the universe what it is. Moving objects, the force of gravity, and so forth. We know how to put things into orbit, and we know how to calculate the escape velocity, how fast something has to be going in order to be falling at the same rate as the curvature of the Earth. So it essentially is constantly in a state of falling, but it never hits the Earth because as it's falling, the Earth curves away from it. And that's how an orbit works. And so, 17,682 miles per hour, pretty specific number. And yet it's the laws of the universe that they were able to extrapolate through physics, the study of physics, the scientists that do all this work. Well, it didn't end with the space program. The study kept going. And there's constant studies into understanding the nature of reality. But at the end of the day, let me just mute this line. At the end of the day, what we know is they did intend to get to the moon. They got there, they came back. And so the intention was get to the moon, get back safely. And so we can say their intention was to go to the moon and come back. And how do we know? Because they went to the moon and came back. And there were times where they didn't. There were spacecrafts that exploded on takeoff when they were launching. There was the famous, I think it's Apollo 11. I think it was the famous Apollo 11 story. I met the guy. Houston, we have a problem. So if you've ever seen that movie, it's a fabulous movie. Tom Hanks is in that movie. Houston, we have a problem. And it's the whole Apollo 11 journey where they had some things happen on the ship. And yet they were able to complete their mission because they had to invent solutions on the fly. Talk about intention. Their intention was to make sure these guys got home safe. And they made that happen. And they had to create all kinds of amazing mechanisms while they were in a very critical situation. Again, what does that tell us? You don't need to know what the mechanism is in order to have the intention. And the mechanism will find itself, or you'll experience it because you will attract it by way of your intention. Your commitment to the intention will determine whether or not you'll ever manifest the mechanism. So think about this in terms of your life and your 5 pillars of health. If you can tell me what you want, I can show you how to get it because it's 100% intention. And then if you give somebody like a mentor or coach permission to hold you accountable to your intention, then you won't waver off your intention, confusing it with counter intentions, which obviously delay the experience. And so these natural laws being so specific and so accurate that we can actually predictably time the landing by a fraction of a second tell us these laws are real. They are naturally occurring. They were here before you and I were born, before human beings were born. We are just simply understanding the nature of the reality we find ourselves in. But once you understand these laws, what can you do with them? Well, you can put a spacecraft on Mars. You can send a spacecraft to the edge of the galaxy. There's things that you can do. Put a spacecraft in orbit. You can have cell phones that bounce signals off of satellites and talk to people around the world because you know how to do that, because you understand the laws. If you didn't understand the laws, you wouldn't invent anything this crazy, this amazing. So an understanding of the laws give us the creative ability to manifest creations that we haven't yet experienced in our lives. And so if you want to become a master creator, then you have to become someone who's aware of the laws of creation. There's a lot of very successful people who couldn't explain what I just did. They're naturally wired to succeed, but they can't teach anybody else how to get there. So good for them, not so good for you. But if you actually read books and study books of successful people, people who made it their life's work to actually distill what's the formula that these people are using without thinking, they just are wired this way. In principle, is there a formula? And for instance, a book called Think and Grow Rich is the formula. In the book, Think and Grow Rich, the guy who was actually charged with the responsibility of encapsulating these formulas, these laws that somehow these successful entrepreneurs were instinctively applying, when they distilled it down, when he distilled it down, it was just a few very specific things. But when applied, those specific things lead to a consistency in terms of results. Let me tell you this story here. This is a really cool one. You heard a little bit about this one. This is Baxter effect. This is the leaf experiment. And let me tell you, there's some really cool experiments that have done since. Let me share one with you. This one I shared with you on Saturday. And this was simply a person put a polygraph on a leaf, was trying to get the leaf to react, and it didn't until he thought, his first thought, it was just the thought of burning the leaf, and the leaf reacted. So you might think, well, how's that possible? Well, there's a mechanism. Clearly, there's a mechanism. There was a cause, there was an effect. We don't know what the mechanism is exactly, or maybe we can intuit it, but now we do know. He thought something, the leaf reacted. He didn't do anything, the leaf reacted. Now, if it was just a one-off, it would be just a one-off. But if it was something that was able to be repeated, then it wasn't a one-off. And what's interesting is all the time leading up to the moment where the leaf reacted, he was trying to get the leaf to react, and it didn't. It only reacted when he had this eureka moment, this, I know, I'll burn it. I'll burn the leaf. Now, is it possible that his frequency, his emotion, trying to fake out the leaf was false? In other words, pretending to be something didn't do it. The leaf could tell there was nothing there. There was no real charge in that thought process. It wasn't until it was an honest reaction, the honest reaction of somebody who has like a eureka moment. I know, I'm going to burn the leaf. That's a moment where he had an inspired thought. Think about this. He's inspired. How do you feel? How does your body react? How does your energy change in a moment of inspiration? Clearly, that's what happened. So we're not talking about thinking things. We're talking about emotions behind the thought. If they're authentic emotions, if they're genuine emotions, real emotions behind that thought, it transfers. The mechanism works, however it works, and it's received. So if we look at this in principle, then we know that it's not enough to think something. There has to be emotion in the thought, and it has to be honest, pure, real. So when I talk about this in trainings, or all the amazing books that are out there that talk about this, they talk about when you intend something, it better be real. When you say you want it, how do you know you really want it? It's got to be your heart. Your heart's got to be in it, because if your heart isn't in it, you don't really want it. And if you don't really want it, you can't fake out the universe. You can't fake it. So it has to be a genuine want. There has to be a real frequency in that want. Otherwise, it's fake, and you won't have the impact on the universe to create the results, to create the reactions in the circumstances around you. That's a huge wake-up call, guys. That's a huge aha moment if you're paying attention. I got to really want it. If I don't really want it, I'm not going to manifest it. I'm going to find every number of mechanisms which I will interpret as excuses to avoid making something happen, because I don't really want it. But if there's something I really, really want, and I align my heart with it, and my thoughts with it, and my actions with it, then I'm really demonstrating that want. And the universe reacts. And you can see how a leaf representing the universe will react. Barbara?
Thanks, Mike. When I was facing this hip replacement, I put a sign on my wall manifesting that the surgery was going to take place on or before June 1st, 2023. So I would have enough time to heal to join my grandson on his 18th birthday. I had my surgery on May 30th. And yet the surgeon had said the first of the year, they weren't anticipating my surgery to take place until possibly September or October. But I focused on that every day. I felt it within myself that it was going to happen. I was sort of surprised when they called to give me my date, but yet I thought, no, I knew it was going to happen, and it did.
And that kind of behavior you could apply to anything, anytime. My girls would apply it to their scores at school. If you were to walk into their room, on the mirror of their rooms was their GPA average for the year, before the year even started. So they were applying this tool, this technique from the beginning, because they were learning what I was learning, and I was teaching them what I was learning, like I've been teaching everyone. Let me tell you another leaf story. This is a cool one. So they got a bunch of scientists in England. This is in the book, The Intention Experiment by Lynn McTaggart. They got a bunch of scientists in England and a bunch of scientists in MIT University in the US to do an experiment on a leaf. Again, it was a plant. And what they wanted to do was make the plant glow. That was the intention. So they put the plant inside this cage, which is called a mu cage, which means there's no way to penetrate that cage with any type of electromagnetic frequency. So they couldn't manifest it artificially. And so they were able to visually observe this thing inside the mu cage in MIT University. The people in England gathered up a bunch of psychics. Why psychics? Well, because psychics have the ability to tune their mind into a frequency. They have a psychic is they're using their psychic ability, which everybody has, which is your ability to focus your thoughts. So they got people who are really good at doing that to focus their attention on this plant in MIT University, imagining, okay, just imagining in their mind's eye through their meditative focused thought of this plant glowing. And they were able to physically observe the glow at MIT University. This is across the pond, across the Atlantic Ocean. So people on one side of the planet intending something with focused intention were actually able to create a manifestation on the other side of the planet. And there was more than one person. So again, the saying, where two or more gathered in my name, the idea of a collective focus is much more powerful than the individual. But the idea, the fact that they can actually manifest something like that is extraordinary, let alone across the ocean. So time and space is irrelevant to this equation. Doesn't matter what time or space has to do with it. Once the intention is invoked, the manifestation appears. So this is really a really important understanding, because if you understand the laws, then you can begin to operate with that level of understanding and then begin to manifest. And you can start small. You can start small in your life with some little things, and then start to realize, holy crap, this is really for real. Again, here's another example of how powerful are our thoughts. Thoughts and frequencies are one and the same. You can they're now talking about computers that can read your mind. You're going to be able to interface because they can read the impulses that are being created by your thoughts. They've already got airplanes that they're flying with just impulses from the person's eyes and thoughts that the person's having about controls. So we're moving into a world where we're going to be able to image people's thinking. Imagine that. And how's that possible? Because it's frequency, and frequency can be perceived and can be amplified, and then it can be translated into a visual signal like our visual cortex does, and then, you know, put it on the screen of something. So here we have an example of this where thoughts, words, impressions on the water are being made, and the water molecules are reacting to the different frequencies that those impressions are making. And each impression has a corresponding frequency. So thank you has a very different frequency than wisdom. And so that's really interesting, because these constructive ideas, words are constructive thoughts. A word is a representation of a thought. And it translates into every language. So regardless of what language you're using, in this case, they were actually Japanese. The words were in Japanese, not in English. This is the translation of the word in English. So it's really fascinating. So what we have is an example of how a thought can make an impression on what we once would believe is simply an inanimate object. It doesn't think, it just responds. And so here it is, the universe, the elements of the world we're living in, what we are comprised of, 60 to 70% of us is water, actually responds to thoughts. So again, if your body and all the cells in your body have water, and your water in your body responds to your thoughts, then what thoughts would you be thinking about if you knew those cells were reacting to your thoughts? Would you be thinking thoughts that are harmful to your health, or would you be thinking thoughts that are nurturing to your health? Again, we start to become much more aware of what we're thinking. We would start to become our own guardians of our thoughts, and we would start to become much more focused on thoughts that were productive in moving us in the direction of what we wanted. Again, is there a mechanism? Yes, there is. Do you need to know what the mechanism is? No, you don't. But there is a mechanism. Clearly, there's a reaction, there's a response, there is a transmission of information. But what is the mechanism relative to the results? Not important. It's the intention. The mechanism is there. You didn't invent it. It's already there. God invented it. The mechanism of the universe is God. And so it's not your space. It's not your domain. It's not your concern. But what is your concern is what drives the mechanism, what takes advantage of the mechanism, the input. The input is your intention. So what makes a person, a leaf, a key? It's the energy behind that and the frequency. And the only distinction between one thing and another is the frequency and the amplitude of that frequency. So essentially, a key can't change its frequency. A key is a key. It's made of metal, composite of metal. It has a certain frequency. It's bound by that. Composition, you can't really change the frequency. It can't change its own frequency. But what's interesting with a human being is you can actually, under Kirlian photography, you can see it react. So for instance, one of the earliest studies that was done for the space program, I actually have a book sitting over there. It cost me like $80 to get this book. It's in print, but it's hard to find, of the woman who was actually responsible for these studies in the space program, because they knew they were putting astronauts into space. 2 Russian astronauts died because they forgot to do something. They forgot to replicate the Earth's natural magnetic field in the space capsule, and it caused them to lose 2 astronauts. So the Russians informed the Americans started doing their own research, and part of that research led to this understanding that you have to replicate the Earth's magnetic field in a space capsule or the people will die. And they did those experiments on Earth. And what they did was they put people inside this mu cage, this cage that shields them electromagnetically, as would a space capsule. So essentially, it's like they're in a space capsule, shielded from the influence of the Earth's energy. What happened? Well, within minutes, they started sobbing uncontrollably, complaining that they felt like their body was falling apart. They went into a state of depression, anxiety, tears, crying, and so forth. Can you imagine? By being isolated like that. And so what happened next was interesting, was they thought, okay, if we eliminate the Earth's magnetic field, if we eliminate this energy, that's the downside. What if we boosted it? What if we actually increased the Earth's intensity, the connection to the Earth's energy? And what they experienced was altered states, the kind of stuff that people usually claim they experience when they're on some kind of drug-induced thing, like, or meditative state. The higher consciousness, awareness, peace of mind, calm, all these things that a lot of people tell us they feel when they put our Nikan magnets on. Especially if these are intuitive people, therapists, massage therapists in particular, people who work with energy, who are very in tune to their body, they'll tell you these things. I've heard them many times. Why? Because this energy induces the body's biochemistry. It's like a biohack. And all of a sudden their energy illuminates. And they've actually seen this. So they've seen bodies, they've taken photographs, they've used this technology to watch what happens to the energy around the body when two people who love each other, like a mother and a daughter, come together. You see the increase in their aura. They call it the aura, the energy field, and it's visible. Or when they're near an ocean, which is high concentration of negative ions, they experience the body's aura increases. So we've actually, this is known. Why is it not common knowledge? Why are the laws of success not common knowledge? Why aren't people using it every single day? Is it possible there's a conspiracy to keep you from knowing this truth, from understanding this truth, from applying this truth? Because if you did know and understand and apply this truth, would you need any governance at all? Would you need any control at all? Would there be the ability to hoard anything from you when you know you could manifest it with your thoughts and imagination? Do you understand the power of what I'm talking about right now? So what I'm talking about will free you from everything and everyone, because it will put in your hands the truth of what has been taught to you by the sages of time, that we are a source and a manifestation simultaneously. We can use our thoughts and our vibration to manifest into this world a frequency that creates impact and results. So with respect to this image here, again, we're talking about the same thing. They're all producing energy. They're all demonstrating energy, but a leaf doesn't change its mind. A key doesn't change its mind, but a human can change its mind. Hence, God's greatest creation is the human being, because that creation can actually think, be aware of its thoughts, and augment those thoughts, thereby changing its frequency and augmenting its reality. That's why we are God's greatest creation. So, moving on, what is vibration? Vibration, how we experience it in our body, is how we feel. Feeling, loosely translated, is conscious awareness of your vibration. So when you're feeling happy, that's a vibration. When you're feeling sad, that's a vibration. When you're feeling angry, that's a vibration. And every vibration is a frequency. So you could literally measure these frequencies. When you're feeling healthy, it's a frequency. When you're feeling ill, it's a frequency. In fact, illness is a frequency. They now have technology where they can actually apply a frequency to your body and destroy illness. It's been demonstrated. It exists. There's a technology that will become available in the not too distant future called med beds. And what they do is induce frequency using light, sound, and these other forms of vibration like infrared, magnetics. They will create harmonic frequencies that are actually akin to you being in an altered state of health. Well, because your body is an antenna, it will be induced. The health will be induced on the body. So all of a sudden, it's like moving a plant from a part of the room where the plant dies. You shift it over to another area and this plant thrives. Why? Well, because the energy is different in that space. That's all you did, was you just moved the thing from one energy to another. So there's an environmental energy that induces health. Why are Nikon's products so relevant? They are more relevant today than they have ever been, because we now start to understand why they're relevant and why, and this time and place on Earth, being in contact with harmonizing energies that are aligned with health, are more important, since we are also surrounded by more and more technology, which is inducing a harmful effect on our body. So here are the books that I'm talking about. I love these books. The Intention Experiment. I met Lynn McTaggart. She was a researcher, by the way. She was just somebody who actually wrote about stuff. And then she started figuring out that there was all these scientists around the world writing about their own stuff, and they didn't know each other existed. They didn't know each other were working many times on the same type of things. And she brought these people together, and what they discovered from each other was amazing. Anyway, this book is pretty impressive. And there's been experiments done in the world now, intention experiments done on a global scale, to, for instance, eradicate war, to eradicate crime. And they actually now have a formula for the number of people that is required in a group in order to create an altered experience, a collective altered experience. It's the square root of 1% of the population. So if the square root of 1% of the population of Nikon consultants were to buy into this, it'd change everything. It's not a lot of people. What's the square root of 1% of 8 billion people? That'll tell you how many people need to shift their consciousness in order to create peace on Earth. So it's doable within our lifetime. It's just that we have to understand.
Alexa, what is the square root of 80 million?
The square root of 80 million.
The square root of 1% of the population. So it's the square root of 1% of 80 million.
1%.
Okay, square root of 1%. That's the frequent. That's the formula. Anyways, so having said that, what we conclude, what we can safely conclude is the mechanism that makes everything work was here before we started. It's just we're discovering it. We're putting formulas to describe it and to apply it. Einstein was doing this from the beginning, equals EMC squared, and all this, they're putting together the theory of everything, which is one equation that describes the reality we're talking about. But, good for them. They'll understand those mechanisms. I don't really care. What I know is what drives the mechanism, what drives the reality, what drives the experience, what drives the result is the intention, regardless of the mechanism and how they describe the mechanism and how excited they are about knowing about the mechanism. But I'm telling you, you should be excited. You should know a little bit more about the mechanism, so you spend less and less time worrying about the mechanism and more time focused on your intention. This double slit experiment, as I explained to you, what we conclude with this experiment is that what you place your focus on, what you choose to observe, whether it's reality A or reality B, the moment you choose to observe it changes the reality. It doesn't matter when it started. This is so freaking amazing, because it doesn't matter what your past was. It doesn't matter what you were thinking 2 seconds ago. The second you shift your focus and start observing the alternate reality, you shift the reality itself and what you will experience in this gap of time that we have to permit for our own sanity and safety. But the second you shift, that's when it changes the reality. It augments the reality that will appear on the screen of your life. This is huge, guys. So what we're paying attention to, what we're focusing on, which means essentially what we are making ourselves aware of, our thoughts, our feelings, what we are bringing into our awareness is what we are essentially tuning the instrument of our body, our mind, our frequency, will then create the image around us that reflects that frequency. it will create the reality that we experience. So start paying attention to what you're paying attention to, because that's what creates the reality. Are you paying attention to the past or the future? Are you allowing this very moment to be influenced by a past, or are you allowing this moment to be influenced by a future? And I'm not talking about just this moment. I'm talking about as a state of being. What are you allowing to inform you? What are you placing your attention on? What are you making yourself aware of? Because that's the reality you're creating. And so what we've learned about this is the past leads to anxiety. That's something that often, because the past is something we often regret, things that we didn't do. So the past leads to anxiety, but the future can lead to fear. The future can lead to fear if you have no faith. And the absence of faith is because you don't trust the future. There's a lot of people who would say, bird in hand. I'd rather go with what I know, the devil I know, than the one I don't. But when you were a baby, when you were a kid, think about this. Did you make moves to stand and learn how to walk based on the past or based on the future? Did you approach life at that point in time in your life worrying about falling? No. All your gains were made by stepping into the unknown. And you went into the unknown with enthusiasm and excitement, not with trepidation and fear. How did we become people who fear the future? How did we become people who are more comfortable knowing the past, even though we hate the current reality of it, but we're more comfortable with it than being excited people who are excited about a future? How did that happen to us? Do you think that was human nature, or do you think we were conditioned? Do you think it's possible we were conditioned through ignorance and keeping us in forever ignorance in a state of fear? Fear of the unknown, fear of the future. Give me your power, give me your authority so that I will take care of you. Don't worry, I'll take care of your best interests now that I own your ass. Think about it. What am I talking about? I'm talking about all the control mechanisms that have made people into wimps, turned people into passive people, passive-aggressive people, even worse, which translates into disease. Rather than people who are excited about what tomorrow brings, who can't wait to see what's going to happen next, because you know it's going to be great, because you know that's how you feel, because you know that's what you're thinking, because you know that's what you anticipate, and you know no matter what happens, you can handle it because you always do, because the mechanism always falls in line with your intention, always, because it's a law that was placed there before you were even you. When you have this knowing, you operate with faith, not fear. Nothing can take that away from you. You can no longer be controlled and manipulated by anything and anyone and any nonsense narrative that they're projecting on you, because that's how they continue to control and manipulate the masses who do not have this understanding. So what I'm talking about is the correct use of our intellect. This is a faculty that we were given as humans that animals don't possess. They have intuition, not intellect. There's a difference. Intellect allows us to think thoughts that are uniquely ours, or we can adopt thoughts of others. But thoughts, you can even think about what you're thinking about. An animal doesn't do that. This is what makes us the greatest creation. This here. And when we emotionalize those thoughts, when we give power to the thought, we bring frequency, energy into the thought, then it can only be expressed in the one way it can be expressed, physically, in the physical reality that we live in, through our body. Because if you don't have it, how the heck is it going to get expressed in this dimension? So your body is your means to experience this dimension. Does that mean that's all you are, is your body? Or is your body simply a mechanism to experience your intellect and your emotions? Otherwise known as maybe the soul? Whoa. So here we are. We understand the mechanism, how it works. So if we're in ignorance, we tend to focus on the negative side of life, which means we think thoughts that cause us, and we give attention to, and we build on using our intellect to create worry and doubt. That's a terrible use of the intellect. Worry and doubt is like a dress rehearsal for something you don't want to happen. And here you are thinking about it until you emotionalize it, and it causes great fear, which translates into our physical body as anxiety. It's a frequency. You can feel it, the dread sometimes. That gets suppressed. We don't show that. We suppress that because we've been culturally taught to do that. We suppress it. You know, you're not allowed to cry. Don't show your weakness and so forth. So we suppress the anxiety, which turns into depression, and the depression leads to dis-ease, and dis-ease is death and disintegration. So if we leave that long enough, cancer and all the other stuff that show up, you think that's an accident? Every single person on this call has cancer. We always have. It's a part of the natural cycle and process of the death and rebirth of our cells. But our body is instinctively intuitive enough, and it has all the means to deal with any of those cells that are aberrations and need to be dealt with, unless you're in a state of anxiety and you're suppressing that anxiety, and it's causing depression, which leads to disease because now there's an imbalance in the body, and the body can't deal with that problem, and that problem gets exacerbated. Do you know that there's been examples on planet Earth of instant regression of cancer? Do you know that? This has been documented, folks. How? How's that possible? By what technique? By what science? I'm going to refer you to a video. Look it up if it's still on YouTube. I'd be amazed, but look it up. It might be. I usually type in YouTube, what's his name? I can see his face in my mind. Curing cancer is the words following his name.
Greg Braden.
Greg Braden, thank you. Greg Braden, Curing Cancer. It's about a 14-minute long video. I have it on my computer in case they ever take it off the internet, because I want to be able to show people the truth. And he's been speaking about this forever. He's written the most amazing books. He's one of my favorite authors, Greg Braden, because I like him, have an education.
Can you
and
get it down on the chat for us?
Pardon me? Can someone
somebody,
write that in the chat? Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
a great idea. Can someone write that in the chat, please? So Greg Braden wrote this or does this video. He's in Milan, Italy, and he's in front of an audience, and he's telling the audience what they're about to see on video. Then he shows them the video, and then he goes back over each section of the video, what they just saw. And what they're able to see in this video is a 3-inch diameter bladder cancer tumor, and using ultrasound, where they take a snap image, so you see a still image of the cancer as they begin this process, and then a real live image as the cancer is in real time, and you watch it fade away in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. You watch a tumor disappear in 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and you'll say to yourself, that's a bloody miracle. And he'll tell you, no, it isn't. A miracle is if something happens that you don't understand, and you created this word miracle to describe this lack of understanding. But if you can duplicate it repeatedly, then it's a science, it's not a miracle. Miracles are words that we invented. Luck is a word that we invented to describe the effects, the results of unknown causes, unknown mechanisms. But when you understand I equals R, you know what the cause is, and you know how the effect works. So the intention that they set in motion, which was adopted by the practitioners in this particular case and the person, the patient, was very anchored in. They anchored in that moment, and they anchored in that reality, so much so that they were literally able to go from one reality to another reality and close the gap in time to 2 minutes and 45 seconds. They went from one state to another state in 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and we get to witness it as we watch it in real time and on ultrasound. And what changed? The physical manifestation is the physical manifestation. Body is not cause. Your body is not the cause of illness. It's the manifestation of illness. So let's go to the positive side of life. Positive side of life uses the intellect in a different way. It builds ideas from understanding. And what magnificent ideas can we build when we have understanding? Let's put a man on the moon. Let's send somebody to Mars. Let's put a satellite in space. Let's whatever. You can imagine all kinds of things. You can imagine a better life for yourself. You can imagine a better life for others. You can imagine better health. These are all things that you can imagine with confidence because you have understanding of how this works. You then build your confidence in faith. The faith is the understanding, is the know-how. It's the knowing the mechanism is there. Trusting the mechanism is there. That's where the faith comes from. Do you think Jesus needed faith to perform those miracles? No. No, he didn't need faith. Faith is for people who lack the absolute certainty. He was absolutely certain that when he applied his will, that would manifest because he had divine awareness. Every one of us is capable of this miracle awareness, but it takes time to perfect that in ourselves. It takes understanding and many lives sometimes. But the idea here is we can grow in our awareness. We can grow in our understanding and achieve higher and higher levels of being able to manifest because it's not faith that makes the manifestation happen. It's the intention, which is the awareness and what we attune our awareness to. We know the mechanism's there. We don't have to question it. But in the absence, faith will do just nicely, as Jesus also pointed out, in the faith of a mustard seed. Whatsoever you ask for and you pray for, ask as though you have received them and you shall receive them. If you could say to this mountain, move, it will move. If you have but the faith of a mustard seed. So faith is the opposite of fear. Faith is the emotion that drives into the body a physical vibration. That vibration is not anxiety, it's well-being. Well-being is something we express, and it builds momentum and acceleration because it's a flow that we don't suppress. It's something we express, and you can see it. You can see somebody who's all really uptight, depressed, and so forth. They're all closed up. Their body's shut down. Their arms are folded. They're shrinking in their body. But somebody who's in well-being is out there. Their shoulders are back. Their chest is out. Their arms are out. They're expressive. That's a very different state of being. That builds momentum, acceleration. They're at ease. And when the body is at ease, everything's working the way it's supposed to. There's death, regeneration, all that stuff is happening without you thinking about it. And that's creation. So we want to be in the creative state. I love this saying by Bob. Faith and fear both demand that you believe in something you cannot see. It's your choice, whether you have faith or you have fear, because you have to believe in something that's invisible to you anyway. So, like I said, I think this world has had enough of control and manipulation by people who are absolutely ignorant beyond belief. So start shutting down your thoughts and your minds to those critical thoughts of negativity, of people who have no consciousness about what we're talking about and are just happy enough to keep you in their pocket. And start liberating yourself. Start attuning yourself. Start thinking for yourself, believing for yourself on those things that you want to manifest. And the attitude that supports this more than any other attitude, which is the congruent thoughts, feelings, and actions. How do I bring my thoughts, feelings, and actions into a state of congruency? I usually show people this book because I think this book is one of the must-reads. You know, I have a photograph that Linda Proctor, Bob Proctor's wife, sent or shared with me when we went to lunch a few months ago. She said Bob was working on another book before he passed. Usually when he's working on a book, he sets on his desk the books that he researches to build his ideas for his book. He sort of puts these ideas all together through his filter, and out comes another manifestation. And 3 of the books, I think 3 or 4 of the books of the 7 or 8 books that are on his desk, again, I have a photo, are all written by Neville. The last book that was written by the fellow who did pass away, the bald-headed guy, Wayne Dyer, that book was an ode to this book. Okay, so it seems like everybody who reaches a level of mastery eventually ends up with this guy as they're on their reading list. This guy happens to be Neville, Neville. All this stuff is available everywhere online, even free. You can listen to some of his lectures. But this book is called The Power of Awareness. This particular copy has included in it The Awakened Imagination. There's a book that's the volume of all of his work that you can get. But what I find, it is really the sum total of everything I've learned. When I first started reading on the subject, the first book I was ever given to read by Bob was a book written by not Wallace D. Wallace. It was 1903 when this book was written, first published. Oh gosh, of course I put myself on the spot. I can't think it right now, but anyway, it'll come to me. Anyway, this book was the sort of the beginning of the new thought movement, the real understanding of how thoughts are things. And it precedes the personal development movement and so forth. Everybody sort of stems back to this guy and his original books, the Dore lectures. And anyway, but I found that of all the stuff I've read, and I've read so many different authors on the subject, even the more recent people, this one really sort of pulls it all together for me, Power of Awareness, because it really is talking about this subject. How do I apply this in my everyday life? First of all, understanding, a deep understanding for the fact that this is the truth and this is how it works. And so be guarded in how you allow your mind to be used or manipulated either by yourself or others, because that is what is creating your reality. Your experience of life is coming through the filter called consciousness. And consciousness, you either have control of your consciousness or somebody else does. And so when you start to take control of your consciousness, you start to feed your thoughts in your mind with original thoughts. When you start to feed your thoughts in your mind with the things that you really want by using your heart to read into it, then you're really engaging yourself and your real authentic self to go after what you really want. That frequency change brings harmony to you. When you love what you love, the first image that I have on the PowerPoint, the new presentation, A Better Way, is an image of a woman singing. Because what that invokes in so many of us, when we see somebody singing, we see them showing themselves, like they're exposing themselves when they sit there and sing. Why is the number one fear of everybody public speaking? They're afraid to show themselves. They're afraid. How did you ever become afraid? When you were 3 months old, you weren't afraid to scream your head off when you had to get your diaper changed or when you were hungry. But somehow now in your adult life, you're afraid for people to see who you really are, what's really under the hood. Believe me, there's nothing there that hasn't been seen. And that's not the scariest part of humanity anyway. I'm pretty sure if you're on this call, you're pretty clean when it comes to how bad it can be. So if we can be less afraid and we can show up and we can actually express ourselves, that's why I love that image, because people really are attracted to the people who do that. We live vicariously through them. Why aren't we doing it ourselves? Heck, they seem to be having a whole lot of fun. Why don't we do it? Go to a karaoke night, make a fool out of yourself, have fun with it. Then you won't be so worried about the next time you do it. As I was saying, this book brings an understanding of attitude, the right kind of attitude. When we are grateful, what we are actually doing is we're applying a faith-based frequency to our thoughts. When you say, I am happy and I'm grateful for the things I am about to receive, it's invoking the law in its pureness. Whatever you ask for and pray for, ask. Whatever you ask for and pray for, that plus thought in your mind, whatever you ask for and pray for, ask as though you've already received it. Well, how would you ask for something you've already received? What would the first words be out of your mouth? Usually people say, thank you. So if you're saying thank you, isn't that a gratitude statement? Thank you for this thing I'm receiving. When you pray for food, if you do, is there a reason why we pray over our food? We bless our food. Do you think something about this equation has something to do with blessing of the food? Do you remember those images of the water? How when you blessed water, when you prayed over water, it changed the frequency of the water? Is that possible? Do you need me to go back to that slide where you see the Buddhist monk, the prayer over the water, turning impure river water into this beautiful thing by a prayer? A prayer, not a filter, but a prayer. Imagine having a filter on top of that. So talk about clean, incredible water. Add a little bit of prayer to it. This is what my glass sits on here at my desk. So my cup sits on this. This is my Nikan Pai water, and it sits on my gratitude part at my desk because I'm very, very grateful for my desk, for this life and this opportunity to share with you what I've learned. And it's always reminding me, every time I look at that heart, every time I pick up my glass, I look at the heart. It reminds me of what makes me tick. So do what you need to do to stay in this attitude of gratitude and give faithful attention to your intention. Faithful attention to your intention. Faith is an action. It's not a belief in something that's a miracle. It's an understanding and awareness that if I am in action in accordance to what I am intending, I am being faithful to my intention. That is an act of faith. A doubt would be, I don't know if I should do that. And I approach something with an energy that's inconsistent with somebody who trusts. Think about it. How do people operate? And if we were to operate more in line with what I'm talking about, well, you would be fearless. And a fearless person wouldn't be afraid of the future. They'd be excited about it. A fearless person would be imaginative. They'd be thinking about all kinds of wonderful things to create and invent because they know they can. And if you're surrounded by people who will support you, which means your environment that you're surrounding yourself with is in harmony with this, then with two or more gathered, you're going to have some momentum behind this creation of yours. Hence, we need each other more now than ever. This Nikan family means something to me. It should mean something to you, because when two or more are gathered, we have some power and some momentum. But we got to get our thoughts, feelings, and actions aligned. We got to get on the same page. We got to be on the same team. And that team is the dream team, the winning team, the imagination team, the team that doesn't allow people to control and manipulate our thoughts, feelings, and actions. The team that allows only good and positivity into the space of creation, that space between our ears. You be that, and you will have amounted, your whole life will have amounted to something significant, because in the blink of an eye, you can go from one life to another life just by changing what you're observing. And that's physics, my friends. That's the laws of physics. Thank God for inventions, huh? Thank God that there were people who were committed to inventing light, because we couldn't be doing this call right now in the dark. So it doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter. Stay focused on your intention. The mechanism will present to you the right solution eventually, because that's the law. There is no try, there's just do. So intend to succeed. Don't intend to try. intend to succeed. So pick something in this repertoire of Nikken incentives and go and get it. Succeed and remain faithful to that intention, because you will figure it out and you will attract to you the mechanism. That's a certainty. And if you have an attitude of gratitude on top of it, you're going to multiply the speed at which you actually manifest. That's how this works. Any questions?
Can you repeat that?
The whole thing? I got the recording.
That was great, Mike.
Thanks, Wes.
You know, every once in a while I get control of my thoughts and I actually get good results.
Yeah, I think implicitly that's where we are. We're good people. I think you're attracted to Nikken because in your heart, you're a good person and you want to make it better for yourself and others. So we are a very important factor in spreading goodness in the world. Paul.
So, Mike, how do the Nikken technologies fit with intention?
The moment you apply the Nikken technologies, you're demonstrating an intention to be well, because you've been presented with an idea that these technologies are in harmony with nature, and therefore you're intending to be in harmony with nature, which in itself affects you.
Yeah, I love that.
So you're reinforcing it. And when you take a glass of water, Nikken water, when you take the nutritional, every time you're making a step in the physical, you're actually reinforcing the thought process and the emotion that goes with it. It's a feedback loop. It's like I'm affirming this, 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 I'm affirming this.
Remember that other people are water too, and we can affect them.
Most certainly.
It's how we affect them that we get the response that we're looking for.
Most certainly. So to speak to that point, if you're coming at somebody from a place of anxiety or lack, you're coming from a space of, oh, I need this sale, that's self-internalized feeling, that frequency is what it's like the leaf. They hear that frequency. It's like the water. They perceive the frequency. So if you don't get your feelings aligned correctly, if you don't snap out of that space of fear and lack and anxiety and snap over to the positive side of faith, hey, if this person really is intending to be well, they'll say yes. I don't have to convince them. They'll convince themselves. If you approach every person with that understanding, hey, they don't have to say yes because I say so. They'll say yes to themselves because they say so. My job is not to make them say yes. My job is to simply give them a reason to say yes.
That's the importance of love. It's a different frequency.
Most certainly.
We're taught to love.
Yeah. Real love is an expression, it's a transmission. It's a gratitude of somebody. It's a gratefulness for somebody. If you're expressing gratitude for the opportunity to be with that person, guys, you have only so many seconds in this life. At the end of the day, it will boil down to an actual number. Someone will be able to calculate how many seconds you were on this planet. And every second of your time that you gave somebody attention was giving your life to them. Are you bringing your best life to them? Are you giving your best self to them? I mean, it's your time. It's your life. Why not give the best? And guess what happens when you do? There's a return. It's always like that. It may not be from that individual. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It always comes from the source. The source is the same. There's only one source for everybody and everything. So it's going to come back anyway, some way. So this is something that Bob taught me. I love this because it really will detach you from the need feeling, the need vibration. I know that everything that I put out returns to me. That's the law. What I put out returns back to the source. Now, doesn't matter what it is, it's going to come back. It's the boomerang effect. It's the law of cause and effect. It's simply karma. Whatever I put out is going to return to source. End of story. Now, it doesn't necessarily come from any particular mechanism. There's an infinite number of mechanisms that it can return to me, but it will return to me. So if I go out with good intention and not concern myself about the law, which will make certain it returns back to me, when I don't have to concern myself with that, then I can focus on the giving of the intention. And then no one feels from me this salesmanship. No one feels from me this need to give me their money, but they throw their money at me. Why? Because I don't need their money. I already know I'm provided for. One way or the other, it comes back. So when I can step into that situation with 100% confidence that it doesn't matter as long as I'm doing the best I can, universe takes care of the return. Doesn't have to come from that person. So I can focus my entire attention on their experience, not mine, on the benefit to them, not me. Because I know it's going to get taken care of one way or the other. And that changes the experience that that person has. It's huge. And then you create flow, and the flow is endless. So if you're constantly flowing outward, constant out in a positive way, this is the minutes, seconds I have with a human being. What can I do to make the situation better? What can I do to improve the situation? Knowing full well the universe has got my back. It says, oh, Michael put up, 115 volts or watts over here. Well, he's going to get another 115 watts coming back. So give without the intention. And the Bible says, don't let the left hand see what the right hand's doing, essentially. Don't give, with the expectation to receive. Expect to receive, but don't give with the expectation to receive. You can expect to receive because the second you impress on the universe what it is that you want, you're saying, here it is. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. Now go out and give, give, give. When it comes back, it goes through that filter and manifests into form in the vision and the image of what you've got holding on, what you're holding on into your mind. If you're holding on to prosperity in your mind, do you need a specific sale to happen in order to experience prosperity? No. So you can focus entirely on that person's journey, their experience. Because, prosperity is inevitable since that's what you vibrate on. However it appears, however it shows up, the gap sometimes between the thought and the manifestation. When you're operating this way constantly, when it's not something you have to put on, but it's something that you are, because you've been doing it so long and you understand. It's the understanding, guys. That's what changes the game. You go from ignorance, where you try something, to understanding, where you know something. Any other questions before we wrap?
Great talk, Mike.
Again, thank you. Well, the recording will be up shortly. If you have, Nancy, did you have something? Okay. The recording will be up shortly. If you think this was worth sharing, please do. And we'll see you on the flip side.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.